health and well-being in housing-related planning policies in England, as they are in Wales and Scotland, and that's an important message of the report. The need, again, for proactive planning to ensure that new housing developments incorporate health creation. And we drew on examples of the Healthy New Towns programme, which did just that, incorporated healthy aspects into urban design and new build housing to support health and well-being in new build housing developments. And then there's the issue of funding prioritisation. And there we particularly highlight the Levelling Up Fund and how that could reduce health inequalities through investment in healthy homes. So just to say a little bit more about the Healthy New Towns programme, which was run in collaboration between the TCPA, the NHS, the Young Foundation, the King's Fund, and their Healthy New Towns really demonstrated, the programme demonstrated how you could build healthy lifestyles into new housing developments, as well as including net zero initiatives such as solar panels, EPC rating. So you're hitting various targets around health and health creation and health support, as well as net zero targets. So hitting BASE's net zero strategy. So you've got this nexus between housing, health and climate change, and it hits so many of those agendas that really the Healthy New Towns and healthy housing programs are really should be supported going forward. And there are also links to the growth agenda as well, and how the importance of healthy homes can feed into a growth agenda. A healthy workforce is more productive. There are fewer days off, less mental ill health. And there's issues around investment, which also creates jobs and helps attract private investment. So there are links to the growth agenda, which mean that the healthy homes agenda really can be put on the table as a viable way forward to support not only health and climate change, but supporting growth as well. So why is it time to tackle Britain's unhealthy homes? And I think one of the key messages from our report is that healthy homes will bring better outcomes for physical and mental health, which will ultimately have enormous benefits in terms of reducing the escalating costs of NHS and social care, supporting efforts to combat climate change, improving a city's economy and productivity, as well as addressing wider health inequalities in society, which is so critical as in this increasing polarisation in society. So on so many levels, I think the time really is now to tackle Britain's unhealthy homes. So it's been a pleasure to report on our findings and look forward to the Q&A and discussion. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for that. That was great, Juliet. I'm now joined by our magnificent chair, Jim Shannon, who's been running backwards and forward. Lord Bethel, who's one of the main advocates, he's just rushed off to vote and may or may not be back. And Derek Thomas is coming back. So it's literally, I don't know, it's like so a running relay, but we will get through this and we'll be fine, won't we, Jim? So I'm just going to introduce Helen now from the Building Research Establishment. Did you want to say something before?
Apologies to everyone for today, and it's beyond our controls. Like over here, you're not really in charge. At home, you're never in charge because you're right in charge, but over here, you're not in charge because things happen. And there was 4 votes there. We had to stay before here. We were voting against it all 4. So we were very, very clear what we were doing. So apologies to everyone for the inconvenience, and thanks to Jill for holding the fort, as she often does. This incredibly important issue. Thank you for your contributions. I'm going to hear some more. The APPG have applied to me for a debate on Thursday, and we'll be bringing this issue of unhealthy homes across the whole United Kingdom. The debates are 1:30 on Westminster Hall on Thursday coming. So I think it gives us a chance to highlight this issue at the highest level, and then also at the same time have a response from the Minister. So if you've you're not busy on Thursday, guess what? 1:30 Westminster Hall, clue in and catch all that's happened, and then more importantly, hear what the ministers got to say in response. Obviously, off the back of that, we will be chasing with the minister to have the questions answered. So we will do a follow up after that as well. Again, humble apologies to everyone for just messages and they not intentional. I didn't control over the top. Okay, thank you.
Okay. So Helen, over to you for why we need to do healthy homes and buildings now.
Lovely, thank you very much. And again, thank you for the opportunity to speak today. At risk of sounding like a scratch record, I'm pretty much going to repeat everything that Juliet has just advocated. But obviously researchers like myself and research organisations like BRE, we feel we have an important role in, providing data to inform public policy and debate around it. But as an ex-housing officer myself, I know there are some dreadful and unpalatable case studies out there, some very deeply distressing human stories where people live in the worst kind of poor housing, presenting very serious risks to their health. And just to, to make you aware that we are aware of that, of researchers as well. And I think, as you say, we're all aware of the long-standing links between poor housing and poor health. And as has been said, though, I still don't think it's really deeply embedded in our psyche when we come to think about policy and practice. And even though housing is considered integral to solutions around, for example, improving energy efficiency and alleviating fuel poverty, we haven't quite recognised in our policy and practice that health and wellbeing and social inclusion are housing related issues, and very much agree with what Juliet has said around that. And I think, when there are pressures on the public purse, and obviously there's going to be more scrutiny of our public purse over the coming weeks and months, it's even more important that we have these joined up strategies, joined up thinking. There are so many good policies coming up, like levelling up, review of decent homes, application of decent homes in the private rented sector. It's so important that they link together. We don't duplicate our efforts, our planning, and the monies that go into that. And perhaps retrofit is a good example of that, moving on as well. So, excuse me. So moving on specifically to our cost of poor housing research, which actually try to promote this sort of joined up thinking and make the economic case for housing investment. Our cost of poor housing research now has been going on for 10 years, and our latest research confirmed that poor housing, which are homes that fail the statutory minimum standard for housing for England, is costing the NHS roughly £1.4 billion a year. And that's an annual sum that continues year on year until such time that poor housing is mitigated. And our previous research suggested if you included all substandard housing, that's all homes that didn't meet the building regulation standards, that annual cost increases to £2 billion a year. Research confirmed, and this is a conservative estimate, that those costs to the NHS probably only represent 8% of wider societal costs of the poor housing. So the wider societal costs to us, which include loss of income through work, etc., total around about £18.5 billion a year. And again, that's a yearly sum that continues every year until we mitigate poor housing. So in terms of why now's the time, I mean, we have to question, can we afford not to act and create healthy homes? And moving forward, we're hoping to do more research on this cost of poor housing by tenure, and also look at the feasibility of providing a 30-year cost benefit analysis, again, to try and inform policy debate and policy decision making. So if we look at one of the most common hazards, again, that Juliet touched on, it's living in an excessively cold home. And we all know the links between excess winter deaths and the link between that and low indoor temperatures and low energy efficiency. And we know this particularly affects older people, people with long-term health issues, but also our young children as well. And it's often forgotten that very cold homes present a risk to children's educational attainment, their emotional well-being and their resilience. And the only feasible long-term solution is obviously to reduce the likelihood of exposure to those low indoor temperatures and improve the energy efficiency of that stock. And like others, we've called, and like your white paper, we've called for a national retrofit strategy to enable that. And that's all. And that retrofit strategy is really the only long-term feasible solution to mitigating fuel poverty. We know it's a huge challenge. We know there's a skill shortage. And when we do this work, we must, of course, ensure, which has perhaps been lacking to date, a lot of quality assurance around that work and learning for what's not happened, what's not gone well and what has gone well. Going back to excess cold, living in a cold home actually represents the bulk of those societal costs. So we estimate the societal costs of living in a cold home are roughly £15 billion of that £18 billion that we estimated. And if we could mitigate it, we could be delivering savings to the NHS of around about £860 million per year. So in summary, we feel, yes, providing these healthy homes is so important. Investment in housing has a huge potential to deliver positive social, economic and environmental outcomes, such as our quest to go towards net zero. And both our existing housing as well as the new housing that we build, as Julia says, should be part of what we consider our core infrastructure to strengthen our economic development. And through positive impacts on health and education, for example, this will improve our productivity moving forward. So there are so many reasons why we need to get the banner going for healthy homes at the present time, because we can't afford not to.
Thank you very much, Helen. And I think we'll swiftly go on to Louise from the UK Green Building Council. I think that'll be quite a nice round, and very pleased to see the three women are telling us what to do. Quite right, indeed. So there we go. Louise, over to you.
Thank you for the invitation to come and speak. It's a really important issue. So for those of you who might not be so familiar with the UK Green Building Council, we were set up essentially as a response to the climate and nature emergency, but also very much with wellbeing and social value at the heart of what we do. And our mission is to drive a transformational change of the whole of the built environment. And we're a membership organisation, over 700 members that we have now right across the spectrum of the industry, from construction and property and financial sectors through to energy, and very broad range of players. And I guess this issue of healthy homes and healthy buildings sits right in this at the centre of the Venn diagram of what's important to us in terms of action on climate change, nature, and well-being. And so we've done quite a lot of work on this issue over the last few years, working particularly with our partners in Hawley and with BRE and others to develop some thinking on that. And we've been working on the key design principles around what makes healthy buildings, but also trying to build a compelling business case for the industry to turn industry around it. So really welcome your work to try and build a campaign behind this and build momentum around it, and really important recommendations from your white paper and the Healthy Homes Bill is a really important initiative. So thank you for all the work you do on that. And our work looks, yes, at the physical implications of the built environment, but also that the mental health and wellbeing opportunities of transforming the whole of the built environment through planning and designing and developing high quality buildings and neighbourhoods as well. And of course, that's about having homes and buildings that are warm enough, that are cool enough, but also they have sufficient space and daylight and ventilation and air quality, and they're not excessively noisy. And all of these things are really important in terms of an overall approach to well-being and healthiness in buildings. So the great thing, of course, is that the Healthy Homes and Buildings agenda also ticks so many of the other boxes that make this urgent in terms of action on climate change, on nature breakdown, on adaptation to climate and so on. And you know, you've already covered some of those areas, so I won't repeat what you said, but very much agree with those contributions. So why now? Obviously, ticking those other boxes around climate and nature makes it tremendously urgent. We know just unprecedented levels of fuel poverty now. So any figures about the impact on the NHS a few months ago, would be much higher now even, and we see that the NHS and social care sector is under so much strain. Another winter of these extraordinary levels of fuel poverty make this an incredibly urgent issue, and not just homes either, but the public estate, hospitals and schools making such difficult decisions about how to spend their money. Speaking to teachers who tell me that people's children at home will not be able to wash their school uniforms and dry them, and so they won't be coming to school. So all of these issues, have a knock-on impact on in terms of education and all kinds of well-being. There's clearly the issue around adaptation and buildings, and the extraordinary record-breaking 40-degree heat wave that we had this year was a shock, I think, for everybody. But the figures have recently come out to show that just in England, with 2,800 recorded excess deaths of 65-year-olds in England alone. And clearly that's going to continue unless we take action on this. It's just the start. We're going to have more heat waves and we can't afford this. You'll have seen me wearing a mask. Clearly the pandemic and ventilation is a huge issue and brings urgency to the issue around ventilation and clean air and air quality. And then two of the kind of really big areas that we're working on as UK GBC are the national retrofit strategy. Completely agree with what you said about that. It couldn't be more important to upgrade the quality of our homes as well as commercial buildings. So we've been working on that, and it's clearly very urgent. I think what makes it right now important literally this week. So the government's energy strategy so far has been all about energy supply and has relentlessly not mentioned energy saving. And just for the first time, Jeremy Hunt, when he announced a review of the energy bill support post-April, he actually name-checked energy saving for the first time as being a really important part of that response. And I think making sure that healthy homes and healthy buildings are part of that response and part of the government's thinking at this time is going to be a really sort of important intervention. Also, we know that, we believe that Jacob Rees-Mogg and Bayes recommended to Liz Truss that there'd be a significant public education campaign around energy saving and the way that people use buildings and protect themselves during this period. We can only hope that with Jeremy Hunt and a new approach that might be revisited, and so any public health campaign that's launched around there should really include the issues around healthy buildings. So there's really important issues around retrofit, and then the other area is around new buildings and clearly the issue of overcrowding and so the lack of affordable homes for people is a huge health issue. Here goes the bell. I'm trying to talk over that place. We're working, so I think it's a once in a generation opportunity at the moment to get the future homes and building standards right. So the government is looking to introduce new standards from 2025 to make sure that all new homes, and we're talking 10,000 homes each year, are brought up to a good standard and making places that people would love to live and work and play in, and helping them to be right at the heart of that. So that's really urgent from the Department of Levelling Up. Officials are working on those plans right now. So having an intervention to make sure that those new standards look at to address these issues is an urgent issue. And then there's planning reform very much linked to that. Already the Levelling Up bill was going through Parliament, was looking at a really major reform to the planning system. We were calling for the planning system to be really hauled to be in line with the Climate Change Act and the Environment Act, so that we have much more consistency and clarity about the purpose of planning, and made sure that all of those issues that are around that will contribute to healthy homes were brought in through the planning system, and we know that what makes great places in terms of healthiness to live would come with the announcement of that. So developments that are designed to maximise walking and cycling and public transport, to minimise air pollution, tree-lined streets to reduce overheating, and green spaces for people to relax and enjoy, and all of these things that ought to be brought into planning reform in order to make it easier to get new developments agreed and have less hostility and opposition to them. I think the healthy homes agenda is fully connected to that. And we're really concerned about the new investment zones that the government has announced. We're awaiting more details on that, but we're really concerned that that is a recipe for ripping up the planning protections and the environmental protections that we already have. So not moving forward to be in line with the climate environmental agenda, but actually tearing some of that up and moving backward. And I think that could have a really detrimental effect also on health and well-being in those new developments. But those are some of the urgent issues that we see, and thank you very much for all the effort that you've got behind it. It's tremendously important.
Well, thank you. I think that gave us a really whirlwind and in-depth, I think, coverage of the healthy homes land and buildings landscape in the UK. I think all three of you made really eloquent arguments as to why the time is now. Arguably, you could have said it was some time ago when we started this originally, when we created the all-party parliamentary group. But I think the pandemic, I think the cost of living, the energy crisis, all of those things really brought it home that our home is so important to how we feel and the places, and it's beginning to, I think, resonate. Now, surprisingly, those who tuned in, you may not have heard the bells, but yes, another vote, which means Derek Thomas did come back and now he's gone. Jim's abstaining, so which is very yeah, when he thinks he's abstaining. So the idea now was to really also to have a political perspective, but given I'm a bit short of parliamentarians. But I do think, Jim, you might want to sort of hang on, there's something. So what?
I'll be upstaining. Perfect, thank you. Okay, right now.
Yeah, it's you are. Yeah.
Okay,
Okay, so I just wondered if you just want to sort of say a few words. Again, we mentioned earlier that Jim, I say we, it's Jim's got a backbench debate for an hour and a half on why this is such an important thing. So I think it's a bit of a big week really for healthy homes and buildings. And then I want to bring in Paul Dennett from Greater Manchester as well, to sort of say this is what's happening there, but also why it's a big issue. Yeah, I think so. Let's bring Paul because he's a fantastic speaker.
Yeah.
And he knows his onions.
Oh no, thank you very much. And can I just say thanks very much to what the APPG are doing here in terms of healthy homes and buildings. It's a really important agenda, as we've already heard. And obviously your white paper back in October 2018 did highlight a number of recommendations which we've all been considering and trying to operationalise, certainly within our city regions in Greater Manchester and across the country. I think colleagues will know the impacts of poor housing on the NHS, certainly back in 2010, were at least 1.4 billion, and that's just looking at the poorest housing stock in the country in England. And if we look at all housing stock back in 2010, the impact on the NHS was 2.5 billion. Those numbers will have only worsened since 2010, as we're now obviously in 2022. Your white paper recommendations back in 2018 talked about establishing a cross-departmental committee for health and buildings, and that is something we support in Greater Manchester, and we've been trying to push this agenda up, government's prioritisation, should we say, for a period of time now. Also, you talk about the importance of research and an evidence base. Again, at the heart of all of the work in Greater Manchester, we talk about evidence-based policy and evidence-based strategy. We need to do our homework on this agenda to make the case to the Treasury and to government to take this agenda a lot more seriously than it has been in the past. And obviously all of this needs resourcing as well. So that piece around campaigning and lobbying is very well made. You also talk a lot about making renovation of current housing stock and infrastructure a government priority and developing plans for retrofitting. That's something we're certainly already on with within Greater Manchester. I think the challenge beyond the pilots and the examples we can point to is how do we actually scale this up across the city region, but more importantly, across the country, and how do we get government on board and financiers on board with actually delivering on this agenda. And we have a subgroup of our retrofitting task force looking at that very issue of how we finance the challenges before us. Colleagues have already mentioned some of the challenges within the labour market and the workforce around this agenda. Anyone who's familiar with Mark Farmer's work will know that the construction industry is an ageing workforce. Brexit has had a disproportionate impact on it, and inevitably to train that workforce up to the level of skills and requirements will require a significant effort on the part of all of us, be that local government, educational providers and industry itself. You also call for a holistic approach to maximising health and well-being, and I think that's something I certainly value. I'm regularly talking to colleagues about the importance of systems thinking, because too often I feel with agendas such as this, do we see a lot of displacement within the system where actors see it as other people's responsibility to deliver on all of this. And if we can bind people into a systems-based approach, I think that will only pay dividends in the medium to long term. In Greater Manchester, we've got growing evidence now, and we've been trying to establish an evidence base that we can track over time around this whole notion of health and housing and the relationship between the two. We've commissioned research from an organisation called Parity Projects, which has been modelling hazards in homes across the city region and also undertaking some energy modelling for the city region. And what's come out of that research is that 53% of homes in Greater Manchester could have a category 1 excess cold hazard. So again, it's providing that evidence base around what we need to tackle and where we need to tackle it on a spatial level as well. Also, 34% could have a category 1 hazard for falling, so falls on level services. Again, something that's really, really important. And I'll come on to the impact on the public sector of not tackling some of that sort of stuff. Renovation of our current housing stock and infrastructure is a Greater Manchester priority. It's referenced in the housing strategy we've agreed for the city region, and it's also referenced in the tripartite agreement between the combined authority, the housing providers, so we're talking about the housing associations, their registered providers, and importantly, the Health and Social Care Partnership, all working together on this agenda within a city region. Health and Social Care Partnership is in transition at the moment. We're undertaking those reforms around the birth of integrated care systems. So refreshing some of the tripartite arrangements we have in place is something we're certainly on with in light of the latest reforms. We've also developed a consortium bid to the Social Housing Decarbonisation Fund, working across 18 housing providers, putting a bid in for £91.4 million to hopefully retrofit 5,874 units within the city region. And obviously that's a welcome boost, and we thank government for launching the Social Housing Decarbonisation Fund. I think it's in its second iteration now, or third iteration, but nevertheless we know that that's really a drop in the ocean in terms of the scale of the challenge we're facing here within Greater Manchester. We need to retrofit 61,000 homes every year if we're going to meet our carbon neutrality target of 2038 for the city region. So I do agree with the white paper's comments around long-term sustainable funding streams from government or in partnership with a whole myriad of how we finance some of this, because there's responsibility across the system at the end of the day. And if we are to deliver this green economic revolution we often talk about in terms of the social benefits, the jobs, the opportunities, the apprenticeships, the positive impact on tackling climate change, and that economic benefit in terms of the benefits for UK PLC and all of this, then we do need government, I think, to step up beyond what we've seen to date to properly deliver on this agenda. Currently in Greater Manchester, we're also reviewing our Healthy Homes service across the 10 local authorities. And the aim of that really is to support people to live in their homes safely, securely, and for longer. 12 years of cuts to local government, who often commission and contract these sorts of services, and uncertainty around future funding, certainly in light of Chancellor's statements more recently, has inevitably resulted in a postcode lottery in Greater Manchester for those sorts of services. So what we're trying to do is learn from the best across Greater Manchester to ensure that we raise standards, have a baseline of data of what's being done by who and where, what the benefits of all that are, and basically scale it up. So we've got an approach for the whole of the city region around healthy home services, because we think by doing some of the aids and adaptations work and some of the work that people require in their homes, it will pay dividends in terms of a positive impact on people's health, mental health and well-being. Build Back Fairer within Greater Manchester. This was us thinking about what do we do after the COVID-19 pandemic. Highlighted that, you know, we really need to quickly get into that space around a preventative model, and that's critical if we're to deliver healthy people living in healthy homes and healthy places and truly transform the health of the population here within Greater Manchester. So all of this work is critical, we believe, to the prevention agenda and the social determinants of health, anyone who's familiar with the work of Sir Michael Marmot, and it sits at the heart now of Greater Manchester's integrated care system. More specifically, thinking beyond that, obviously the home is inevitably a driver for health inequalities. Inadequate housing contributes to preventable diseases. We all know this: respiratory, nervous system, cardiovascular diseases, cancer. The direct effects of an inadequate home on a person's health and well-being can include, as we all know, heart attacks, stroke, respiratory diseases, flu, falls and injuries, hypothermia and poor mental health. I mean, the data is there, the literature is there, the evidence is there. Poor housing is estimated to cost the NHS at least £600 million per year, and that's just looking at the first year of treatment costs alone. Across the north, around 24% of owner-occupied properties fail to be at the decent home standard, and when we look at the private rented sector, it's 27% that fail to be at that decent home standard within the north. Well over 60% of non-decent homes in the north are in the owner-occupier sector. So I'm just highlighting some of that, because we know from the RUG review, for example, anyone who's familiar with that work, we have a real challenge here in terms of how we finance some of this work moving forward, because people are often asset rich, but actually cash poor. So the financing that sits around all of this is going to be really important, especially if we're to deliver on our ambitions. There's also evidence that the interventions to improve quality and sustainability and suitability, of the home environment can reduce demand for social care and healthcare, can enable people to manage health and care needs, but also allow people to remain in their home for as long as they should choose. Unsuitability of housing and the need for a suitably adapted properties can support the challenges we face in terms of delayed transfers of care from our hospitals. We know that 6 months, I mean, this is some of the data I've been looking at, 6 months in 2015, 916 days were reported as delays waiting for adaptations in people's homes. So getting those homes up to the standards required can really pay dividends for our National Health Service, allowing us to deal with the growing waiting list and prioritise care for those who need it the most. We all know that minor adaptations, repairs and trip hazard removal prevent falls, injuries, but also improve people's health. And 1 in 3 people aged over 65, 50% of those aged over 50 fall at least once per year, costing the NHS £2 billion per year. So anything we can do to shift the dial on all of that will allow us to invest in other areas of activity, and certainly for me, the preventative agenda, which, as we know, is very much at risk as a consequence of some of the financial challenges we're facing, both in local government and the NHS at the moment. Greater Manchester's story is one of partnership. I've talked about the tripartite agreement and the role that that's playing. I welcome ultimately the fact that we're talking about the relationship between health and homes, because this has been a long time coming, and anyone who's familiar with Sir Michael Marmot's work and the wider determinants of health will understand the absolute importance of this agenda. The biggest challenge, as I've said, is the homes we already have. We need to retrofit 61,000 a year to meet our carbon neutrality target within Greater Manchester. This is happening within, you know, a real crisis economically, but also a cost of living crisis that's disproportionately impacting the poorest within our society. And it's also happening at a time when we have huge NHS pressures, both in terms of bed capacity before we even get into the winter, and waiting times, accident and emergency, all going in the wrong direction as we still continue to grapple with the challenges of COVID as well. Colleagues have mentioned issues with regards to planning, and I think they're well made. Viability continues to be a huge challenge for the city region here in Greater Manchester because of differences in terms of land prices and property prices in line with what people are actually earning. And obviously we're hearing a lot of noise at the moment in the system about the further liberalisation of planning, building on the permitted development rights that we've seen to date. That is a real concern for us moving forward. Liberalisation is not going to deliver on this agenda, in my opinion. And let's not forget, many planning applications have been granted permission and have not been delivered by the construction and development industry. I'm not quite sure that liberalisation of planning is the way forward, personally. Capacity will continue to be an issue. Local government has sustained 12 years of austerity. My local authority has seen 232 million taken out of its revenue budget since 2010. 53% of central government grants taken out of what is the 18th poorest city, local authority actually, in the country. You know, and that's according to the government's own index of multiple deprivation. So a plea for the institutional role of local government in all of this, a plea for properly funding local government, and, you know, concerns I'm raising now around, you know, the recent consultation the government did on social housing rent increases. If government doesn't fully fund councils and housing associations, I don't know where the capacity is coming from to deliver on some of this agenda moving forward. So I am very worried about where the government's going. If we don't lift, or if we don't actually fully fund the CPI plus 1% increase, then it's a real term cut for councils and housing associations in this space at a time when we need that capacity the most. We're trying to influence government through devolution and the Greater Manchester Trailblazer. Housing and homelessness and the relationship between health and housing is a key priority there, in addition to tackling some of the practices, poor practices within the private rented sector, delivering truly affordable homes. And what I mean by that is homes at social rent, council housing, for those who remember the post-World War II era when homelessness was rendered statistically insignificant in this country. Why was that? It was because councils were delivering council housing en masse, and it was truly affordable and delivered to a decent standard. So those are my reflections on what we're doing in Greater Manchester. It is a challenge in the current economic climate. We're doing a lot in this space. We're doing it in partnership. We're doing it in an evidence-based way, but we need to continue to lobby and influence to ensure national government get on board with helping us to deliver on this agenda. Thank you.
Okay, Paul, thanks very much. That was very helpful, and especially your stats on health issues as well, and saving the cost of the NHS. I think you mentioned £600 million per year, and just do down specifically to unhealthy homes. Thank you for that. And Derek Thomas, my friend and colleague, as a right back in the voting endeavours. I'm going to ask you, Derek, could you say a few words?
Yeah, thank you, Jim. Thank you, all the speakers that I've missed most of. Apologies for that. So the reason I got involved in this APPG in the first place is when I got elected, it was around the time of the Paris Climate Agreement. But there was also a time where various organisations were looking at, the government had talked about a £2 billion fund to support the improvement of these things. And the infrastructure, sorry, £100 billion infrastructure fund, which I was hopeful that someone would go into retrofitting housing. And a report had come out to demonstrate that my homes in my constituency, not my personal homes, the homes of my constituents, in St Ives, West Cornwall, Isle City, were the leakiest homes in England, potentially, with the focus on the climate change agreement and the studies that have been done across Europe, possibly the leakiest homes across Europe. Partly, or certainly the most fuel poor homes. And part of that's because we're off grid. Most of our properties rely on oil or gas, and they're poorly built, granite beautiful buildings, but not very good at keeping the heating or being healthy. And so actually for the whole time been MP 7 years, I've been raising it as the need to improve our homes for lots of reasons. Certainly health, attainment for young people, how we support the NHS by keeping older people in home and healthy at home. So it's something that I have spent a lot of time looking at, and then the background I have, which helps me, is that I was in the building trade and converted a lot of homes, and they are very efficient homes. And even 2 weeks ago, I was speaking to the last barn I converted before I got elected. I was talking to the owner of it about the cost of fuel. They're off-grid, and they say they hardly heat their home at all, usually just when they're cooking or in a wood burner on some evenings because of the way we insulate it. So it is possible to insulate the most tricky of homes, because actually barns have special dispensation from planning because they seem to be difficult to do. But so the argument that we're trying to make is not a new one, and the government will have heard it over and over again. But I think the opportunity that lies before us today, that Jim and I and many others can push and will push, is that the government are very keen to reduce demand of energy. And they're obviously doing that because of cost of energy and cost of living, and at the moment what that's costing the taxpayer through the support that's been provided, rightly so. But so where the government are looking at energy security, I believe we, and those of us that care about the space, can contribute to that debate and put forward a really helpful answer. That may well have already been covered this afternoon. I'm sorry about that. We've been in and out of the voting lobby. But we can quite effectively address the energy demand reduction that the government are talking about today by retrofitting and also improving the new buildings that we build. And as we know, that will deliver cheaper homes to live in, healthier homes to live in. And so I think, I don't want to speak for long, but I just think that the cleverer way of us going forward with this debate and actually really seeing a difference in, or accelerating the interest that government has in this, whether it's eco or many other ways of helping to retrofit homes, is to really press the energy reduction space. I think that is the way that we can. I don't think we need to win the argument. I think the argument's won. It's just getting government then to find a way of funding it. And as I say, an MP of homes that are really not in a good place, and the quality of our homes is pretty poor. In fact, there's a big debate in Cornwall at the moment about the ownership of second homes and who should have access to our homes. But the reality is, and it's just a reality, is that quite often our homes get improved by people who have the resources to come and buy our homes, do them up. And so we see the people that don't have the money live in, as has been said, live in quite very fuel poor homes. The homes that are seeing the investment and the improvements that are needed are homes that are owned by people who don't necessarily live there, but have them as a holiday let or as a second home. And that's a real sad place to be, because actually we need good homes for local people. So I just think that we need to really, and I talk to myself and my colleagues, we need to really hold the government to account for their determination for energy reduction, but actually give them tools on how to do it. Some of the suggestions we've had in Cornwall is to give the cash to local authorities. I've got 2 local authorities in my constituency, Isles, Scilly and Cornwall, to actually get them to work with local developers and local builders. Previous schemes haven't worked in Cornwall because local builders haven't been engaged. Companies have come in, followed the money, done pretty shoddy work on properties, and so it's undermined confidence in the ability to retrofit homes. So there's a really important piece of work to do. It's vital that we do it, and we must speed it up, if only to reduce energy demand and the cost, if that's the only motivation, and the cost of people's household finances, the pressure on them. And as a result, we'll deliver the healthy homes that my friend Jim is so determined to deliver. Over to you, sir.
Hopefully more me, because I'm Terry, thanks so much. That was very helpful. I think maybe we're going to hand over to Jane now. Jane, you'll do a wee bit of a sort of summary, bringing the discussion together, and and on the campaign, and we've been talking about the campaign. I think everybody's missed the campaign. Louise has, and Derek has. And I think maybe also I believe that Paul has indirectly in his comments. So can we ask you perhaps to lead that discussion if you wouldn't mind? It's lovely to see you again, by the way. I love your hair, but your hair never changes. I don't have any hair, that's why I'm probably jealous. You know, there you go.
Very often in between the dies, but thanks, Jim. The discussion today, all the research, thanks so much to Helen and Juliet and co for kind of talking about all of this. The need is still there. We've been talking about this for 5 years. We've been talking about how the costs add up, the savings to the NHS should pay for some of these things, and yet we're still not there. It's great to hear what's going on in Manchester. It's great to hear that they're trying to tackle this, but you know, it is a huge thing to overcome, and we don't have enough money. We don't have the skills. We don't have the knowledge across the whole industry to deliver all these things. There's a lot of barriers to doing it. At the last meeting, we kind of ran out of time a little bit towards the end. Everyone was really passionate and wanted to do something. And the real clear message out of the last meeting was that we need to do more. And what we've heard from the research today is that, you know, the costs are going up. This is ridiculous. People are dying in poor quality housing, and we have to do more. So Jill and I were talking about what can we do, what more can we do. We need to do a campaign, and this is where we wanted to get the views of others, give them the chance to have a say. And you know, what should that look like? What more can this group do to actually get things on the agenda? Fantastic. We've got the Westminster Hall debate on Thursday, but there must be more we can do as a collective to get this across. Jill, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, thanks, Jade. I mean, just to echo the mood of the meeting, and very much from Lord Bethel, who again has popped over to the division, and it's a bit harder to get to through the Lords. So the passion at that meeting with Lord Crisp, Lord Young, the activity and support is there, and there has been an acknowledgement. Obviously, we're in a situation at the moment where the government has changed hands, and we need to get that back on track. There's a lot of space and issues on that agenda which are linked to the energy and cost of living crisis. But what I think we need to do is pump up the volume. We need to sort of get public support as well, or acknowledgement, or media support as well, to sort of say, yeah, this is a campaign. Now, parliamentarians like Derek and the Lords and Jim, we've got an opportunity here to make some noise. That's what we want to do, because we, you know, with all due respect, we know the arguments, we've got the evidence, we also know what the benefits of upturn is. The point that Derek made there about the focus on energy reduction is part of that, because, but you can't reduce something that's not there, if you see what I mean, because people in your constituency are probably not even using much heat at the moment because they simply can't afford it, and therefore they are living in homes which are making them ill. And they're not just in Derek's constituency, they're in everybody's constituency and everywhere you go, because there are inequalities out there. So I think what we're talking about, Jade, and correct me if I'm wrong, we want to really see some movement. So there's a parliamentary campaign, lobbying campaign, which I know it is cross-party, and that is a strength, because I think if we go to the point of view that we do acknowledge that there's an inextricable link between the homes we live in and our health, and even where we live and our health, the need to acknowledge that we want to live in better, better and healthier places is a desire that everybody should have, but without fundamental shift, I think, in terms of policy thinking, that we know more about our homes and how they're built, what needs to be done to retrofit homes well for the future, but also that bigger piece about making sure that government is joined up, but they are on message in terms of saying, yeah, this is a cost benefit to society, and why wouldn't you do it? Because we can prove that we can reduce energy, but we can also reduce the pressure on the NHS. You know, enormous pressure on the NHS, which will only get more. It's not just the NHS, it's already a beleaguered care service. So all of those things are little things of education. And of course, don't forget, we need the skills to retrofit. We need the input. We need to build homes which are fit for the future. Somebody said to me the other day, we shouldn't be building homes with boilers with gas boilers, given maybe that's right or wrong, but it's not forward looking enough. You have to have an ambition and a vision. We can't really, but this comes from my point of view, keep sticking plasters on something, or even not actually finding where the plasters are to actually fix this problem. So I think it is a cross-party campaign. I think we can pump up the volume here, but it's that piece of and getting people to say, I care that I want to live in a healthy home. I don't, and there are the people, if they can get that connection, and if we can talk about, you know, behavior change and actually understanding that this is what we need to do, whether it's drying your clothes on a radiator or whether your window's open, you don't, all of these might be, or you've got noisy neighbours, or you put blah, blah, blah. There's 101 things, as Paul pointed out and others, the impact on our health, and no more, you know, and mental health. It's been a huge increase in mental health, and that's a real problem, I think, moving forward. So I don't think there is an argument against having a campaign. I think there is, I think we do need to pump up the volume. I think there's enough people on the call and others who may want to sort of say what that is, but ultimately, if we're going to do this, we do need to sort of get people to support it. We need to have ideas about who would chip in to make this public facing. It would be the all-party parliamentary group. We can do that because we can, you know, ask the questions, keep pressure, have other events. We can have a launch of the campaign and get, you know, various parliamentarians, including whoever might be the housing minister and health minister of the day, and really make this an issue that parliamentarians, when and if, not if, but when they do go back to their constituencies at a general election, that we can say we've really done something here and we have changed the mindset. So that's sort of the vision, I think. And I don't know, going back to Jane, I don't know if anybody is asking questions on the chat, Louis, or no, people probably, or anybody wants
to keep them in line.
I mean, I'm conscious of the time, and really, I suppose today was really to say, you know, are we in favour of moving forward with healthy homes for healthy Britain, or it doesn't have to be that, but something along those lines, which was Lord Bethel's idea. But it is sort of more public facing. It's something that parliamentarians can easily say, yes, I agree with. I think that whole thing about where we are now, which we've all explained so well, it crosses over such a plethora of policy. If we can put health and well-being at the heart and across government thinking, then we'll be in a much better place.
We do have a couple of hands up now, Jill, if we can bring people in, if there's time still.
So Gary, Kath and Peter Rogers.
Yeah.
Hi everyone. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, Gary.
Just to let you know that the chat box has been disabled, and that's probably why there's no questions in the chat box. So yeah.
Oh, sorry.
That's okay. I just thought I'd let you know.
It seems to be working for me, so I'm not sure why that's the case.
Hi, it's Pete Rogers. So I'm representing the Institute of Acoustics, and I was just really interested to hear there the sentiment for the campaign, the pump up the volume, make some noise thing. I thought I could probably add some benefit on that, but I would say actually on the point made about around the demand for energy, so much of it can hang on that in terms of how that can be done. And with noise pollution as now, one of the top things to tackle, recommended by the UN and WHO, we do have an opportunity to really stick our head above the parapet on this one. It's not just, there's issues once you thermally insulate a property and you think about opening the windows. It's actually noise poverty as well we have to consider in terms of exposure. And also, as you mentioned, the noisy neighbor thing, permitted development is a serious problem, which is threatening a lot of healthy homes in the future, from my perspective, because once you start allowing residents to creep into commercial, you start killing off the vibrancy in places in licensed premises. So many angles, and I think it's just a case of identifying which ones are the key ones, but certainly acoustics can help you there.
Okay, thanks very much, Peter, for that. Anybody else on the screen at all? See this, sir?
Keith Ritchie.
Keith, please.
Hello, thanks very much, Jim, and very nice to contribute to the session today. I'm sorry I missed some of the earlier conversations, but I represent BEMA, who's been a sponsor of the Healthy Homes and Buildings APPG for a number of years now, and we've been pushing the Healthy Homes agenda for all that time, very much focused on indoor air quality. And the whole of the government's strategy in terms of insulation does require people to focus on indoor air quality and make sure that properties are properly ventilated, because that's critical. A number of speakers have talked about the health effects of freezing, making sure buildings being too tight, all the respiratory, heart cancers, etc., etc. But the point I really want to make today is that I think we're about to see a real health crisis in our public housing, particularly over this winter. We haven't had any cold weather yet, but the number of people who are apparently in fuel poverty as a result of the cost of energy, I think we are going to see some horrendous numbers for excess deaths in the next over the next 6 months before we come out of the winter period. And that, to my mind, is the message we should be making to everybody that can listen, and particularly central government, because I don't see that there's going to be any way that or that government are going to be able to react in time for this. We will find out about this after the event, as we saw with the heat effects during the summer, but that's too late. We need to be making the point now that people are going to be seriously affected by the cold weather.
Okay, Keith, thanks very much. Michelle, see you've got your hand up as well. Michelle, do you want to ask, if possible, a very quick question, if you don't mind? Thank you. Michelle.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for allowing me. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, Michelle, go ahead, please.
Yes, as the last speaker said, we urgently need to do something now, because the poverty of I would say 18 of homes and everything else is affecting families and children. And you can start seeing children. I mean, we started hearing in various meetings how children are coming to school without being washed or well fed, and a lot of other things apart from the energy and the inefficient homes with mold affecting asthma, as you said. It needs to be urgently looked into, and I'm quite happy to come on the campaign to see what we can do to persuade the government to start investing in this project. Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle. That was very succinct. It's nice to hear your voice again. Although we do send text messages to each other on a regular basis, but various issues. So nice. Anybody else on the?
Just say the chat's back up again now. So if you want to place any questions in there, the tick box that seems to be on the wrong page. But if anyone, either put your hand up and I'll bring you in, or paste the question in the chat.
But if anybody's got a very burning question, we'll do one more, because I think I've been told that there may be a vote this one. Derek, have you been told that? Well, yeah, well, if there is, that means we would be away and not coming back for the time. Anybody else? Got a quick, Alex Baines, please. Alex, please, quick question. Thank you very much.
Afternoon, and thank you for the input. I'm the chair of the Retrofit Standards Task Group at BSI. It's interesting, as we've developed standards over the numbers of years following the Each Home Counts review, that a certain amount of funding has followed, and there is funding obviously going forward with eco, etc. But to build slightly upon Keith's earlier point, we talk about healthiness and buildings. It's been very noticeable that that funding has focused on energy efficiency improvements. And there is no funding as it stands for ventilation. And yet ventilation is the key first point following assessment and design in most retrofits following that PAS framework. So the question is, what can be done about that and to reevaluate those points that fall under those frameworks?
Okay, Alex, thanks very much. That's helpful.
I just wonder if it'd be useful to bring in the speakers just for their comments and thoughts about what the campaign should look like.
Okay, we'll start. I think the first Louise. You got the first one?
Yeah, like Juliet.
Juliet was the first one. Juliet, do you want to give us a quick summary of what you feel the campaign should look like, please? We'll start off. Okay, thank you.
And it's such a critical campaign, and it's a campaign, as has been said, that hits so many policy areas. So I think a multi-pronged approach and using different mechanisms to really get the message out there, and the urgency, I think, of the agenda, and how really, as we've heard this afternoon, how people will be dying. People will be dying this winter because of unhealthy homes, and it's so urgent that I think we really do need to push this on all fronts, in all relevant departments, government departments, and through a media campaign, through social media. And I think it's sort of too urgent not to be addressed. So yeah, I'd say full speed ahead, I think, on that.
Judith, thanks so much. Louise?
Yeah.
Please. Just take it there. This is perfect.
Yeah, clearly there's a lot of work going on at the moment on energy efficiency. There's a large public campaign all this winter pushing for that across the NGO sector, as well as a lot of work from our sector, from the industry side of things, pushing for retrofit. And I think if we could bring together an alliance of the health campaigns alongside local authorities and industry together in an alliance over this, I think that would be really powerful. And one of the things that UK Green Building Council does is we bring together local authorities, over 35 local authorities on a regular basis for them to build campaigns around retrofit, and then bringing this issue into that and using that as a vehicle to support local authorities to have a voice in this as well could be part of the answer. And then I think, yes, public information and a public agitation campaign, but then really focusing that in on the decision-making points, which are around what is the government going to do on retrofit, what is Jeremy Hunt going to do in terms of his announcements around what's going to happen after April, and the energy approach to support the energy, and he announced something on energy saving in there. How can we get that agenda inserted into that? How can we insert this agenda into the future home standards that are being drawn up right now by officials in DLUB, and also on planning reform through the Levelling Up Bill and through this whatever we're going to hear on the investment zones. So those would be sort of policy areas to intervene on.
Okay, Louise, thank you. Helen, I think it should ask you before the apologies. Helen, if you're there now, please. Thank you.
Yeah, agree with what's been said before. We've talked about sort of multi-agencies in speeches in what we have, and as well as talking to people in the housing field, as you say, I think we need to speak to people in the health field as well. So you've got that coalition of joint thinking, because this involves so many aspects of policy, So it definitely needs to be a broad coalition of people who are like-minded and committed together, really, so that there is a sort of consolidated and consistent argument by all these different organisations.
Thank you very much. Paul, please.
Yeah, no, I agree with comments that colleagues have already made. It is a complex area of public policy, but ultimately for me, I think, you know, couching it in terms of a public health crisis is where it's at, juxtaposed with obviously the cost of living crisis and the climate crisis that we're facing in this country. I think for me, it needs to be evidence-based. So, you know, making it tangible for the Treasury is something we'll need to continue to do in terms of what are the benefits for the public purse of investing in this agenda. I also think there's something about case studies and making sure we make space for co-production and lived experience and getting those authentic voices into the campaign, because, you know, the last thing people want to hear is politicians talking about this agenda. They want to actually hear what impact this has on people's lives that is tangible. So authentic voices for me is where it's at if you want this campaign to have impact. In addition to that, I think, you know, thinking about the alignment between all of this with what we're trying to do in terms of an economic strategy around green economic revolution, linking it with jobs, skills, innovation, R&D. And, you know, if we get this right in terms of retrofitting and net zero carbon homes, linking it with the export agenda for UK PLC. And then finally, I do agree with the comments previously made about reducing energy demand and increasing energy security in the UK. I think that is a big winner if we can get that as part of this campaign. But those are my thoughts on where we should try and pitch this. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. Derek, please.
I just want to come in briefly because as an MP who is presented with every kind of imaginable crisis in my email inbox, there's only so much that government can really think laterally through. So I think the last point that's just been made, if we can do this as we have the solution, rather than just add another crisis to all the others that we never realize. I'm not trying to undermine at all or underrepresent exactly how significant the challenge is, but we actually need to get government to engage and solve it. And so I think if our campaign can be about we have the solution to a problem rather than just another crisis on the desk of the Prime Minister, that probably is going to give us a bit of traction that we might just get put on the box of crises otherwise.
Yeah, well, thank you. We run short of time, so can I just thank all the speakers? Can I first of all apologise to everyone for we picked the day to have this whenever there was numerous votes taking place. It was like a conveyor belt. We're in, we're out, we're shaking it all about, you know. We're shaking it all about, that was a funny problem. But anyway, thank you for your patience to your speakers, to Dr. Colette Carpenter, to Helen Garrett, to Louise Hutchins, who is next to us here, Lord Bethel, who's here for more time than I was, I suspect, for Gary Thomas, who like myself was in and out and run about, and to Paul, thanks for your significant and substantial words as well. I think these have been helpful to us all. I appreciate better the situation. A big thank you to Jim and the team.
Yeah, and just to say thank you for Jim as always, but the Westminster Hall debate, Blackbench debate on Thursday is significant, and it is a big opportunity for us to sort of ramp up the volume, as I've already said, but also it's a good sort of benchmark for us. It's a while back since we did the first one, so that will sort of see where the government's coming from, and I hope that Derek and others colleagues will join in that debate. But the idea of having this campaign for healthy homes, healthy Britain is really a big turning point. And I think you're absolutely right. We have the solutions, we know the problem, but we know the recommendations are there. So it does, I think how we couch it, the narrative is really important. But I want to thank you because I think we will launch the campaign, not sure when, but we will launch it soon, and then that will be a big thing when we do that, and hopefully we'll have got some traction there. But ultimately we want something people can literally say, I want to live in a healthy home. Simple sign up approach as well.
And with that in mind, the highlights or the headlines for the meeting and the backtest debate on Wednesday will be the energy crisis, energy savings, fuel poverty, exceedingly cold homes, and the most important thing, we need action and not words. And I think that's what we're all about. I think we can integrate what we're about into what government's policy is. I think if government's got a policy, and they have, I know they have, and you know they have, on health, they've got a policy on houses. We want to feed into that policy to work together. And that's what I'm always about, that's what Greg's always about. I'm not in the business of adversarial politics, I'm more in the business of trying to make it happen. And that's what I like to do. So again, to everyone, and apologies again to everyone for how much we've been so not dismissive, we're not in control of our own lives, and that's just a fact. But thank you so much, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you all. Thank you, Jim. Thank you, Jim.